Hi, I'm Dan Janal, and this is my view. This actually is my view. I actually do overlook the Pacific Ocean. That is a whitewater view. And the reason I'm showing it to you instead of my book is because if you want to hire a book coach and developmental editor, you want to work with a successful book coach and developmental editor. You don't want to work with a poor developmental editor and book coach. You want someone who's successful. And I think this view, actual real view, shows you that I've done okay in life. And that's because I provide quality work. In today's episode, you're going to learn how I work and how I can work with you. A lot of people wonder, what is the process of working with me? The day-to-day ins and outs, how does it actually happen? And they also wonder, what are the benefits? How have I helped other people? And consequently, how will you be helped as a result? And you'll see those in these case studies that I'll show you. So stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to write your book in a flash. Okay, first question people ask is, what is a book coach and what is a developmental editor? Well, a book coach is like a coach. You know, they help you through the high points and the low points. They hold you accountable. They answer your questions. They provide feedback. They're good people. What is a developmental editor? A developmental editor looks at the big picture. They see what you don't see. They prod you. They poke you. They see ideas. They run ideas by you. They make your ideas better. That's what I pride myself on doing. Now, some people are book coaches and some people are developmental editors. I do both, and I combine them into one program because, frankly, I don't know where one ends and the other one begins. So when you work with me, you get the benefit of having a book coach and a developmental editor. So that's one reason why you might want to work with me instead of hiring two other people who would charge you a lot more money. So just saying. So you're probably wondering, how do I help my clients? Let me give you a couple of case studies. First, there was Amber. Amber was writing a book, a self-help book for women between the ages of 35 and 50, whose children no longer needed them. And you're thinking to yourself, how can children no longer need their mothers? That doesn't make any sense. Well, when they're 6 years old, it's mommy, come here. Mommy, help me. Mommy, I need you. But when they're 16 years old, it's mom, give me some space. Mom, chill out. Mom, don't let the door hit you on the way out. You know, does that ring a bell? Yeah, it does, I'm sure. So she knew her audience, but let's face it, the only thing that makes a self-help book different is the stories you tell. You know, they all have mind, body, and eat well and exercise and yada, yada, yada. They're all good. But what makes them different is your stories. So Amber's book was reading like every other book I've ever read until I got to chapter 3. And chapter 3 had a subhead that said, "Excuse me for being gross." And the story went something like this. I have an earthworm emerging from my belly. It's about 1/4 of an inch wide and a few inches long. It's my stretch mark. It shows where I gained 180 pounds bearing 4 children and where I lost all but 20 of those pounds, and I'll probably never lose those last 20 pounds. But I wear it as a badge of honor because it shows that I bore 4 great kids into this world who are going to make the world a better place. I thought, man, that is your signature story. When people read that, they're going to say, I identify with you. I like you. I want to work with you. How can we work together? It builds the know, like, and trust factor. Plus, losing the 20 pounds or not losing the 20 pounds, that makes her very relatable, not like the people who can fit into their yoga pants 2 weeks after they deliver a baby, right? So I said, Amber, you have to move this to the front of the book so people get to see it faster. You have to highlight this. And that's what a developmental editor does. They see things you don't see. They see these nuggets of gold that you have that you don't even realize yourself. So not only do we move it to the front of the book, but then I got an idea. It was an inspiration. I said, what better title for a book that talks about going beyond the bounds, going beyond the marks, coloring outside the lines, and all those other goal-setting cliches you've heard, What word exemplifies that better than stretch marks? And that became the title of her book. So a really good developmental editor not only sees what you don't see, they take your ideas and they make them better. When I work with my clients, I sometimes have conversations with them and they go in many, many different directions. And sometimes those conversations yield a pot of gold. I was working with a former NFL football player named Alex Molden. He was writing a book on how student athletes can cope in the real world and succeed in the real world. And he had a wonderful outline. He would talk about attitude and character and other ideas for getting kids straight. And that was wonderful. And every week we would meet and talk and we'd go through the chapters, and I'll explain that process later. But we would get to know each other pretty well. So one day we're just having a conversation and he said, you know, man, I wish that students would take more advantage of the student placement office. I said, what's a student placement office? He said, well, that's like a career counseling center where students can go and get advice on how to apply for jobs, how to do a resume, how to dress, how to answer questions in an interview, what to do, best practices and all that. I said, that sounds pretty important. He said, yes, it certainly is. I said, I was looking at the outline for your book and I don't see anything about the student placement office. Don't you think we should put that in the book? And he said, exactly. So sometimes you are so close to your material, you don't see the nuggets of gold that other people would find valuable, or that you thought you've already written about because you just thought it was there. That's what a good developmental editor can do. They see what you don't see. When you choose a developmental editor or a book coach, it's great if they have some background in your material. For example, I was a business newspaper editor, so I know a lot about personal finance. So when I work with financial people, I pretty much know my stuff. But one time I was the developmental editor and book coach for a woman who was writing a book about accounting practices. And I really am not an accountant. And I was looking through her chapters and almost apologizing, saying, I really don't understand the technical aspects of this, but I do know how to tell a story. And if you want to make this information more palatable, you need to put your ideas into the forms of stories and tell case studies of clients that you've worked with, so your readers can see themselves in those stories and therefore want to hire you because they see you as the leader who can take them from mess to success. So I taught her how to tell stories properly, even in a typically boring, or I should say boring, typically dry subject like accounting. So it's important for your developmental editor and book coach to know the essences of storytelling, organization, writing, publishing, and many, many other factors. They may not need to be an expert in your field, that's where you come in, but they should be an expert on writing and publishing. Let me tell you about another client of mine. Candy Campbell wrote a book about how to use improv techniques to improve healthcare. And she's a wonderfully gifted performer and nurse. And she described a typical scenario of a conversation that went off the rails between a nurse and a doctor, and how a patient suffered as a result because they had bad communication skills. And then she showed how a simple improv technique called yes and would have changed the situation entirely. And then she went on to talk about something else. And I flagged that. And I said, Candy, wouldn't it be a good idea to show an example of that conversation using the yes and technique to show that the conversation could go back on the right path and the patient could be helped? And she said, yeah. So sometimes you don't see your material because you're so close to it. You need that outside observer to come in and look and see what you don't see. Another one of my clients, Ryan Carrillo, wrote a book called The Big Man Bible. It's a self-help book about body image for large men. A lot of books about body image for women, but not very many about men. So I was really excited to work on this project. He had a lot of great ideas. He'd written blog posts about this. He'd done some lectures about this. He had a lot of material, but that's almost a curse, because having a lot of material means that there's duplication, there's overlap, there are bad transitions, and you have to make sense of it all. And he was too close to the material. And he thanked me for going into the book and saying, this belongs here, this belongs here, this doesn't belong at all. You've already stated this twice in the book. Let's get rid of it. And again, he couldn't see the forest for the trees because he was too close to it. And that happens to a lot of people as they're writing their book. Sometimes writers need confirmation. Another one of my clients, a leadership expert, was writing a book about leadership. And it was your typical boring, dry stuff. And I read the first chapter and I was like, okay, well, this is what I signed up for. This is what he wants to write. I can help him. I've read a lot of leadership books. I've gone to a lot of leadership conferences. I know a lot about the subject. I can help him. But man, this is going to be more of the same old stuff. And the next week, when we had our talk, he said, I'm a very poetic person. I take walks and ideas come to me, and I write these poems about leadership. Can I share some with you? And he did. And they were really good, almost like songs and questions that would ask people to think and explore ideas about leadership. I said, you've got something here. He said, I think I do. And I'm glad you told me that, because I needed the confidence. I need someone else to say, I can do this. And I said, yeah, you certainly can. If you can think of, 30 or 40 or 50 of these, you'll have enough for a book. And he said, oh, I can do that in a week. And pretty much he did, because he was that creative. And he wrote a book that he really enjoyed. And frankly, it's a book that is so different from every other leadership book out there that covers the same old stuff, that it stands out, and he's making a name for himself in that marketplace. Plus, he's written a book that he can be proud of. And don't you want to write a book that you can be proud of? So I was happy to give him that confidence, and then the weekly collaboration and feedback on his work to make sure that he was on the right path, and also to hold him accountable that he was writing and keeping to schedule. So that really worked out well. Sometimes I work with clients who tell stories, and the stories don't mean what they think they mean. And in some cases, it means we just move them to a different chapter. They write a story that they thought was about trust, but it wasn't about trust. It was about loyalty. Okay, they were too close to it. Someone else could see it and say, okay, let's move it here. And that's something else that I do. And it's a lot of fun. But frankly, I like taking someone's ideas and making them better. I like to have that value add. That's where I get my jollies. That's where I have fun. So those are a couple of case studies of clients I've worked with. You're probably wondering, okay, how does this process work and how long does it take? Okay, I specialize in working with people who write 20 to 25,000 word books. That's about 10 chapters, about 125 pages. That's about what people want to read today. They don't want to read long books anymore. The shorter the book, within reason, the better. If the book is too short, it doesn't look like a book anymore. It looks like a white paper. And those aren't the kinds of books that inspire trust or authority, frankly. So you want to have about 20 to 25,000 words. I think you can write that in 16 weeks or less. That's by writing one chapter a week, every week for 10 weeks, and give a little bit of time for vacations or getting sick or other things that happen in your family, or just needing a break. And life happens. That's okay. So I think 4 months is a good time. So what happens during those 4 months? Well, we meet once a week for an hour, and I interview you. I ask you questions. You ask me questions. So let's say it's a chapter about character. I would say, okay, tell me a story about character. Tell a story. I'd say, okay, I'll ask you a few questions about that. Round out some detail. What was some dialogue in that? Give me some color. Give me some ideas. Give me some perspectives. What do you want people to know about as a result of reading that story? What is the moral of that story? Okay, great. What does that mean to you? Why is this topic important to you? And then maybe ask a few questions like, what are some coaching questions that you would ask readers to think about and to ponder about so they can make the material their own? And depending on the book, we can go in other directions as well and go deeper into certain areas. But I would record that and give my client the transcript so they can actually take the notes and write from those notes and actually pick up stories and even copy and paste the material and clean up any kind of language and verbiage as needed. And they would send that back to me and I would review it. I might ask a few more questions, like things we hadn't thought about before. When you read a story, you might say, oh, what happened here? What happened there? What do you mean by this? Can you define this term? Can you get some statistics to back this up? Or other details that we might have missed in the initial conversation. Because you're not expected to know everything right off the top of your head. No one is that perfect. That's why you need someone to work with who can see over your shoulder and give you advice. So that's what happens during the week. So we interview, you write, I review, I send you my notes back. And when we meet for the next week, we go over any lingering questions from that first draft and lock it up. And then we say, okay, let's work on chapter 2. And then we go from there week after week after week. We keep you on schedule so your book gets done. That's how the process works. If this sounds like something that you'd enjoy working on with me, I invite you to come to a 15-minute discovery call. You'll see the link below in the show notes. And if you're writing a nonfiction book, I invite you to have a chat with me and see how we can work together. If you're writing a children's book or a cookbook or a religious book, I'm not the right person for you. And if I'm not the right person, I will tell you. In fact, I have a wide range of friends and trusted colleagues who might be able to help you as well. So send me an email that says, hey, do you know anyone who could help me write my children's book or my cookbook or my music book or my whatever, historical fiction novel? And chances are I know someone, and I'll be happy to refer them to you. And my email is dan@prleads.com. That's in the show notes too. Just send me an email and I'll be happy to help you. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to helping you write your book in a flash.